Hello, and welcome to a very special episode of Rewatching Home Movies. This is my interview with Chris Georgenes, an animator, editor, and art director for early home movies. Chris was a super nice, super cool guy. It was a really fun interview. If you enjoy what you hear, please consider leaving a 5-star review on Apple or Android. I will read 5-star reviews on the podcast. Thanks again, and now, the interview. I'm here with Chris Georgenes. He's an animator and an editor and worked on home movies. Chris, thank you so much for doing this, man.
Oh, my pleasure, Timmy. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. So I did a little Facebook stalking, and I see that you're an animator, you're an editor, you're a drummer, and I'm sure that just scratches the surface. So my first question is, what started this obvious love of the arts?
Well, I went to art school. My parents kind of pushed me to go to an art school after high school. And I was always musically oriented in terms of what I wanted to do and passion in life. And I thought, music school makes sense. But my father, I never took an art class before. So my parents were like, we should go to an art school. And I'm like, really? They said, yeah, we think that's probably a better option. So I went to the Hartford Art School and I got a BFA in illustration, printmaking, no animation experience whatsoever.
Wow.
And I got so crazy lucky working for what eventually became Soup to Nuts.
Yeah.
I was actually, in a way, there's lots of overlap between music and art and animation, because in this sense, one of the first examples of overlapping was I was in a band in Boston. And a friend of the band's one day said to me, hey, there's this, and this is 6 years after I graduated. I wasn't finding any work in that field. This is pre-internet, pre-cell phones, this is just such an analog world we were living in.
Oh, yeah.
And so a friend of mine said, hey, I've got a friend of mine who's working on this new animated TV show, and it's being produced in Watertown, Massachusetts, which is basically part of Boston, a small town suburb of Boston. And I had actually seen promos, and it was on Comedy Central. It was called Dr. Katz.
Yes. And
I'm like, really? That show's being done in Watertown, here on the East Coast, whatever. So then Monday came, I found the address. I probably used the Yellow Pages or something to find the address of the company. I drove there with my portfolio. I dropped it off on a Monday, and I said to the woman behind the desk, I said, I'll be back Friday to pick it up. Anybody who wants to see it, feel free to show it to them. I didn't try to call and get an interview or anything, nothing formal. I just that's it, a guerrilla tactic to get, my stuff seen in front of someone. I went back Friday to pick it up. Annette Kate, who was the art director for Dr. Katz, came up and met me, showed me around. But then it wasn't until a month later I got a call from Andre Lyman, who is an animation director there, who said, oh, yeah, by the way, we remembered you from a month ago when you were here, dropped off your portfolio, and Steven Spielberg had noticed our little show called Dr. Katz, and he asked us to produce a pilot for his new company at the time, which was DreamWorks. No one had ever heard of it.
Oh, wow.
And I'm like, why are you calling me? It was one of my first questions, because, it was an animated pilot. I said, Andre, this is great, but I've never animated before. He's like, that's okay. And I said, this is all on computer. It's all paperless. And he's like, yeah. And I said, well, I've never even used a computer before. He's like, that's okay.
Oh, no. Wow.
I'm so underqualified. And I got hired, I think it was just to do the pilot. And for 4 months or however long it was going to be, I ended up getting hired full time and obviously being there for about 6 years and doing other things, including home movies. But that's how I got into that company. Basically learned on the job. And the style of animation, it wasn't Pixar or anything like that. We were just drawing and basically squiggling or doing that sort of line boil effect to bring our, drawings to life. And that was the first introduction for me in terms of making animations, or I should say making drawings come to life in a very simple hand-drawn kind of way. And it just, kind of blossomed from there.
Wow. So all this started just with illustrating.
Yeah, that was it. My portfolio was just full of illustrations, lithographs, etchings, stuff from art school. I had to literally dust off my portfolio. I pulled it down from the closet and blew off the dust and brought it there, and they looked at it. And all they really wanted, requirement-wise, was someone who could draw. So, and from there, so we would do, when we were animating, so to speak, we were using something called Animator Pro, which was a DOS-based animation program
Oh my
by,
goodness.
yeah, Autodesk made it, but they were no longer supporting it. But we were running these old, not even old, now they're old, but they're just simple, basic DOS-based computers with a Suma Sketch graphics tablet with a stylus had a cable attached to it and stuff. And it was just, but for me, it was all brand new. We had an Avid workstation. Yeah, and we were just drawing stuff. We were like creating shots where you'd have a character and in front of a background, and then through the use of the software, we would hand draw that same character over 5 frames, and just the human imperfections of trying to recreate the same drawing created that line boil or squiggle vision effect, as they called it. And then that was basically it. The simple, what it was kind of a production breakthrough in the sense, because we were animating quickly and cheaply, and it was more about the conversations than about the actual. We didn't want the animations to be so sophisticated that they would detract your attention away from the actual conversations that the characters were in the studio. Like when they were recording the characters, what they left in a lot of the imperfections of casual conversation. So it kind of gave it more life that way.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So it was kind of like a great introduction. And I remember moments so I'm, as mentioned, I'm a musician, but Andre was also a musician. He was a guitarist. And one day he said to me, most musicians make good video editors because of their sense of rhythm, and that transfers over visually. So he said, hey, I'm going to lunch. I'll be back in an hour. He sat me down in front of the Avid Media Composer workstation with all the bells and whistles and colored little keyboards. And I'm like, wait. I mean, it felt like I was in a cockpit at NASA about to launch a rocket. He's like, here, just, there's a minute-long bar scene for Dr. Katz. Just edit it together using all the footage that we have from the animators. So I said, okay. And he came back an hour later. He hit play, and he's like, yep, you're a video editor. So that's that's how I was learning,
Learning by doing.
Yeah, just roll up your sleeves, dive in, and don't be intimidated, and just give it a shot. So
that's awesome.
Yeah.
That's awesome. A little trial by fire.
Exactly.
Okay, so what are some of your favorite cartoons growing up, as well as like your influences for your illustration style?
It's crazy because my influences and my illustration style, I didn't feel like they were, they went hand in hand or were directly influenced. I loved growing up. I mean, I was born in 1967. I'm kind of like a 70s, 80s kids, but I remember Saturday mornings watching Warner Brothers cartoons, Chuck Jones, Bugs Bunny, that kind of, those kinds of animations. And, eventually it was SpongeBob and Regular Show and things like that. But back then, it was mostly Saturday morning cartoons between Bugs Bunny, Daffy Duck, Yosemite Sam, like all that stuff. So those are the biggest influences. And in fact, I created an original short. I finished it this past spring. And in it, as a character, is a chicken that I kind of drew influence directly from a Warner Brothers character called Witch Hazel, where it was a witch that was just this wacky character who would always just take off from a standing still position. And whenever she did, you'd see these like clothes or hairpins.
Hairpins, yes. Oh my gosh, I remember this.
Right. So that was like a core memory of mine because I remember as a kid noticing little details like that. And I recognized the fact that those are things that the animators threw in, probably not the writer. Right. And it was just a great little personality trick. Like she had this endless supply of hairpins every scene. And so when I was animating something as recently as this spring, I had this little chicken doing things. And every time it made a sudden movement, I decided, I should just have it lose some feathers every single time. So it's like those are the little subtle the devil's in the details kinds of influences that I gathered and took from my core memories and subconscious and things like that. So I always recognize the slapstick humor as well. I used to watch, those Saturday morning cartoons with my father, who was, 50 in his 50s and whatever, however old he was. He would crack up laughing and fall off the couch onto the floor. And I'm like, he kind of taught me how to, I guess, laugh and be funny. So
It's always interesting when you're a kid and you're experiencing an adult laugh. And your little kid brain, you're like, okay, why did this happen? And what can I do to replicate it?
Even if they were kind of grown-up-y jokes, I remember one Bugs Bunny Daffy Duck episode where they're in Venice and there's a chase scene, of course, and they're in the little boats, the gondolas, is that what they call them? Yeah. And so I think Daffy Duck put an outboard motor on one to try to catch up to him. And, he's doing like $1.90, and he turns around. He's unaware that there's a low bridge, right? Like a bridge going over. And he's standing up in the gondola, and you just see like that wonderful moment where he realizes the impending doom of his head, slamming up against the bridge. And when it does, you notice that there's a sign that his face slams into, and then he eventually slowly slides down out of frame and revealing what the sign says. And it says, Ducka Uhetta Lola Brigida. And, obviously Lola Brigida was, an actress. But just the fact that like I watched my father cry with laughter and fall off the couch onto the floor. And I'm just like, I don't know, the timing. Like I always acknowledge the fact that like such a great scene because of the timing. It was funny for a little kid. It was funny for an adult. Like it was like the perfect shot, and I'm like, wow, between that and I don't know, what's the Three Stooges, he used to laugh hysterically. So I think by watching my father laugh at things like silly slapstick stuff taught me, I guess, what's funny,
That's awesome. So I checked your IMDb, and it said you worked on home movies from 1999 to 2002. Does that sound right?
Yep. That's about right, yeah.
Okay, so does that mean that you had some overlap between the UPN run and the Adult Swim run?
Yes. So initially, when Lauren Bouchard, who created it, the pilot came to us with like, I think it was about a minute or minute and a half long pilot in audio form, all fully edited, ready to go. And I remember we sat down and listened to it. And we had no idea what this was, this is just a piece of audio. So we started to imagine, basically how he described it. All right. Brendan Small is this precocious, little kid, and he loves to make home movies, and Melissa and Jason and all that. And so we just put together this pilot, and for us, it was just a fun little project. And then all of a sudden it gets picked up by UPN. I was the original art director. Kim O'Neill is another artist that helped, and I credit her a lot with the look and feel and style of home movies, especially when we were designing characters, and she would just fill in the color of their shirts and everything. And obviously she didn't put any kind of separation between like the end of the shirt and the hand. Right. So she would just fill everything in. All of a sudden we had these onesie pajama things. And I said, I remember looking at her like, you're going to fix that, right? You're going to draw a line at the wrist and then, grab the flesh tone. She's like, no, I kind of like it as is. And I'm like, what? Like I would have never thought of that. And I'm like, all right, let's keep it, and we'll wait and see what,
see if the network tells us to fix it.
Yeah. Or even just everyone else in the studio at the time, like someone's going to say, hey, that looks weird. But no one ever did. That's the crazy thing. No one ever questioned it. We just presented the characters as they were, and everyone's just like, great. And then no one has ever said why, it just taught me a lot. Like sometimes you just put it out there, and sometimes, no one will question it.
That's wild. So what are some of the differences between, dealing with UPN versus dealing with Adult Swim?
Well, with Adult Swim, by the time, we did 5 episodes for UPN, and then UPN went under, like it just disappeared. It closed its doors. And there was about a year between that and when Khaki Jones and Linda Semensky from Cartoon Network, who were already fans of the show because they saw it on UPN, they were responsible for getting home movies on Cartoon Network. But it was over a year in the interim. And then by that time, Aya Fukuda became the art director for the new episodes that aired. I worked on the show for the first season as well, somewhat, but I was already on to other projects at that point. Right. And what we were also doing was we transitioned out of Animator Pro into Adobe or Macromedia Flash at the time. So new software, new production. That's why those shows on UPN look wildly different than the one on Cartoon Network. So working directly with the networks, I'm sure it was very different, but I can't speak to the whole Cartoon Network thing as much because I was more directly involved with them. With UPN, though, it was interesting because, again, I didn't have to work directly with them, but through, say, Lauren and maybe other executives or directors, we'd get word about certain things that they would want us to change or not. Like there's a scene in the car with Melissa and her dad. We had to make sure they had seatbelts. We didn't draw those in initially. Things like that.
Yeah, there's an episode where Brendan is taking care of the neighbor's cat, and the inevitability is the cat gets rabies and dies. And they said in commentary that originally it was going to be a dog, and UPN was very adamant that we don't kill dogs on primetime. Yeah,
things like that. They have certain things like that sounds about right. That's vaguely familiar. So I think we did change it to a cat.
Yeah. There was a first or second episode. I think it's second episode. Brendan comes home to Paula, and it's the parent-teacher one. She admits that, she got a call from Mr. Lynch, and Brendan says, "Oh, Jesus." And in the UPN version, it's actually edited out. It's like bleeped.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, they would have strict things about certain details like that. Even, I'm trying to think, the 5th episode, which is the one where McGurk takes them all camping.
Yeah, Yoko.
Yep. That episode wasn't even part of the production schedule originally. I think we were working on the 3rd episode, and UPN asked us to do a 5th episode for some reason. And the reason usually a full season would be like, I don't know, 22 episodes or something like that. And the reason they only initially asked for 4 was because it was late in their season when they asked us to produce all these episodes. So for whatever reason, they decided, we would love an extra episode. And we're like, okay, so we can, we'll figure out, how to adjust the schedule, couple more weeks we'll need to add, and whatever the cost. And they're like, well, we don't have any more time to give you or money.
Oh, geez.
It was one of those situations where we didn't know what to do. And I remember we had an off-site meeting, which we never did before. And it was with my Lauren, myself, and some of the art directors and the higher ups, let's say. And I thought it was sort of strange that we're going off site and get some space somewhere in some kind of a WeWork situation, I guess, now that I look back on it. But it was sort of funny because they said, we sat down and they're just asking the questions like, how are we going to pull off an extra episode? We really feel the need to do this and build a relationship with UPN and get a full season order maybe for next year and things like that. And they're looking at Lauren and myself, and I'm like, well, wait a minute, I'm on the spot, aren't we? So I remember there was a moment of silence. It was sort of awkward. I just jokingly said, well, the only possible way production-wise or animation-wise we could pull this off is if there's a total blackout, so no one can see anything. And there was sort of a nervous laughter, but I looked over at Lauren, and I could literally see the light bulb over his head, and I could see it, the look in his eyes, like, oh, he's got an idea. And that's what turned into the whole premise of McGurk taking them camping at night. So that's how that happened. But I remember to your point about networks and what they what they would approve or disapprove would be, I think McGurk at one point in the original story was going to leave them. Like he was like, I'm out of here, and then the network's like, you can't do that. The adult or guardian cannot abandon the children. So, but there is, you'll hear it in the audio. He does talk about leaving, but then he backtracks, he backpedals and says, of course I'm not leaving. That was sort of an extra scene that they recorded and added in.
Yeah, I think he makes an offhanded comment like, well, if I leave you guys, I might, go to jail again.
Yeah, exactly. That's where that kind of came from. To the best of my recollection. Of course, it's all a little vague, but that whole episode was kind of a miraculous in terms of production, because I remember thinking, all right, we don't have any extra time to do this. So I put the whole animation team, I had about 7 or 8 animators on episode 4, I packed a bag, a toothbrush, clothes, and moved into work, into the studio, and connected my computer directly to an Avid. Lauren was recording and editing audio, bringing it over on an external hard drive. I don't know, maybe 30 seconds to a minute at a time. I was laying it on the Avid timeline, listening to it, and no storyboard, just like animating one scene after another, like laying down train tracks. And that's how that whole, I'd say most of that episode came out. And I'm thinking to myself, man, no one's even like looking over my shoulder, approving anything, or we're just, whatever I think of is going to be the next shot. So, wow. So yeah, that's why about a third of that or a quarter of it is just in dark, and all you see are eyeballs. It just was
eyeballs. Yeah, that's brilliant.
Yeah, it worked out. I didn't think it was going to be. I just thought, oh, this is going to be one of those episodes no one's going to like, or we're going to forget about. But it turned out to be one of the better episodes in the sense of story and just uniqueness, I think. And that was the last episode we ever did, I think, with using that technique inside of Animator Pro, where we were just kind of smearing the line work, and then before we switched over to Flash, which was all a vector-based program with cleaner lines, and we kind of abandoned the whole squiggle vision look. And then the animators were great because they started, or illustrators, I should say, because they started adding more and more animation, and we all sort of became really, or much better at animating, and it just became a funnier show that way. It was just great. A combination of the best of both worlds between the audio conversations and then the visual aspect of it.
Yeah, it's so wild too to hear that with episode 5, Yoko, because that episode is such a good episode. It shows what happens when you bring a fourth person into their 3-person dynamic. With Bonnie, some of Jason's best lines about, like, we're not here to make friends, we're here to make movies, and ultimately the losers here is the public because they see the product and the product isn't there. I mean, just and to know it was that rushed. I mean, kudos. It's such a good episode.
It's funny, guys. I think it's somewhat human nature to do your best work under pressure. Mm-hmm. You can give someone, 6 months to do something that would take 2 weeks. And if you do it early and get it done with plenty of time left, it's one thing. But to wait till the last 2 weeks and then to be like, oh my God, and then just kind of focus yourself and work on it feverishly, sometimes you can get better work or better product out of that kind of production style, I guess. So yeah,
absolutely. Now, speaking of, obviously, I'm a big fan of the show. I do listen to a lot of commentary. We do a rewatch podcast, so I'm doing deep dives into pretty much, every episode as I'm doing breakdowns. So considering the amount of improv and retro scripting that's, done with the audio, whose job was it to determine what makes it into an episode versus what gets cut?
The audio editor, ultimately. And I think that was, but I mean, I think Lauren could probably speak to that more, but I know he was doing the audio editing for at least the first season. And I'm sure subsequent seasons after that, but I forget, I don't remember if they brought in more.
Yeah.
A lot of times they would do various takes on things, or just, have a certain outline as to what the story would be, but then there's a lot that takes place in between those bullet points. And they would just pick and choose things. Lauren is pretty brilliant when it comes to that, because I remember during a Dr. Katz episode, there was a joke that he made funny in the editing. It was something where one of the guests was imitating a fish, and I'm going to do a bad job of describing the scene. But when Lauren told me how it came about, like the scene was something about a fish who would say something, and he said it once, and it wasn't funny. And then Lauren decided to just duplicate the line that the fish says, so that there's an awkward gap or moment in between the lines, and then the fish says it again, and it made it 10 times funnier. So sometimes it's just the audio and the timing. And the privilege I always got was when we watched our episodes with a group of people, because then you really know what works when they laugh at certain points or don't laugh at certain points. Even sometimes when you just cut to a character who's listening to another character and they just blink at exactly the right
Yes.
moment. That could be funny.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. There's a
right?
scene where McGurk is talking to Brendan and Melissa, and he's like, yeah, I don't know what that guy's issue. He probably had a bad childhood like you guys. And it's just that quick frame of Brendan and Melissa, like mouth open.
Yeah.
And he just brushes by it like, just another sentence.
Yeah. Or even there's a scene with Walter and Perry and in a church, and they're talking about getting married. And I animated that scene, but a lot of times we'll use cutaways to avoid doing full animation. Sometimes if the character goes from point A to point B, we'll do a cutaway first, or in between. But I remember using that as a kind of a vehicle for comedic purposes, where we'd cut to some sort of, Mother Mary statue just looking awkwardly.
Yeah.
And that's just a single drawing. It's not animated at all. It's just a timing thing and an editing thing. And so I learned a lot about the visual storytelling and the timing of visual storytelling through all those shows, and learning from Lauren, and learning from even the animators around me. Like Damon Wong was brilliant. And he was much more technically profound with his animation. He did more animation than most of us early on, and I learned a lot from him. And but he went on, I think, to be a storyboard artist for Bob's Burgers and things like that with Lauren. But we were all like just kids in a studio making this stuff up, figuring out how to do all this, and just having fun doing it. Because you don't think, when at the time the show is so new and young, that you don't. In a million years, I would have, if you told me, oh yeah, 25 years, you're going to be doing an interview, answering questions about this show, I'd be like, that's insane. This is just a silly little animated show that's barely animated, but it's crazy. So that's why I say, when I look back, or when I look at, Facebook groups where people are constantly quoting and posting about the show, and photos of tattoos that they got that have characters on their skin, it's just, it's insane to me. Or if I wear something that has a Home Movies logo on it, I'm like, whatever, checking out at a supermarket, and the person at the register is just like, oh my God, I love that show.
Yes.
I'm like, wow, that's incredible.
It's wild.
It never gets old. Yeah, it's wild.
The longevity of the show is just, it's wild to me. The thing
I was just going to say, and it was only on for 3 seasons.
Yeah. And it's wild because, part of this podcast is, me with my co-hosts, who one of them, she doesn't know too much about home movies. And then the other co-host, he turned on a UPN episode way back in the day. And it was, I think, honestly, just the animation style kind of put him off. Yeah. And then he's not a fan of what I call gross Jason, which especially in the early seasons, it's almost leaned into. Now, I do have a question, and this is more about the animation and editing aspect. And I just want to say, when you agreed to do this interview, I let my co-host know, and I said, hey, if you guys have any questions, please let me know. And inevitably, all 3 of us landed on the same question. So we were curious, why garden gnomes?
I wish I had a profound answer, because I don't think anyone really knows. I think someone just added a gnome into one of the background illustrations, and it just sort of became a thing in a very organic way, as to the best of my recollection. Sometimes things like that would just happen organically.
Sure.
Someone would just be like, oh, the gnome is cool, let's just keep the gnome going, and then it just sort of grew from there, because we all found it funny. A lot of times we were just trying to make ourselves laugh.
Yeah.
And especially when it came to designing characters. So one practice we did a lot when, I don't know, if there's a new episode or even a brand new show or something, we would need to develop characters. And so day one, we would all just spend the morning, a few hours, just drawing characters one after another in the animation program. And usually you do a character or 2 maybe for each frame. And then we break for lunch, come back, and we would all gather around us, one artist's computer, and we would go into sort of like a slideshow presentation mode where we just sort of hit the arrow key and jog through each frame. And the characters that popped up where we would all chuckle or laugh were usually the ones that got picked. Because we felt like if that's funny to us, it's going to be funny to everyone else. So yeah, as far as garden gnomes go, that's just one of those things that just became part of, I guess, the lore of the show. But for no one ever sat down and said, hey, let's add something into the backgrounds that just becomes something like an extra character in a sense. But no, I think someone just it could have been one animator who just kept on adding gnomes. I forget though. I don't know if it was Dave Sanangelo or I don't remember that. I don't know if anyone even knows. It's just one of those, organic things that happened.
Well, and gnomes are perfect too, because it's, something that's organic, inoffensive. Garden gnomes are just kind of there,
Yeah, exactly.
Maybe there's some huge secret behind it. Maybe it's just a garden gnome,
Yeah, sometimes that's all it is. It's just there. It's just an object. It's just, sometimes it would be a sort of comedic cutaway shot too. Because they're just, they're just funny sometimes. Especially if there's an expression on their face that just is perfect for that moment in the script.
Yeah. We just watched the episode, identifying a body with the walkathon for the homeless.
Oh, yeah.
And the final scene is Brendan oversleeping for the walkathon, and he is cuddling a gnome, and the gnome is like smiling, and we're like, oh, it's like a comfy gnome.
Yeah, it's just the animators just having fun with it. That was the great thing about it. And also there wasn't a lot of art direction, overseeing, and rules. We didn't have a lot of that. We were literally just taking each episode, breaking them into scenes, and then handing them out to different animators, and then whatever you would do, because we only had about 2 weeks to animate every episode.
Yeah.
So a lot of times it was just like, okay, we just put your trust in the animator, and we would do storyboards and things like that. But in terms of the little details, sometimes we just throw in things that weren't in the script, or no one ever said, hey, let's do this. It's just the animator said, I'm going to do this because I think it's funny.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Now, as someone who has worked in animation and has, consumed animation as well, what are your personal thoughts about squiggle vision?
I mean, I heard a lot about, it making people sick sometimes. Yeah. There was always that aspect to it. With Dr. Katz, that the intention was to create a very crude technique of animation that was fast and cheap. Mm-hmm. And because we really wanted the audience to pay attention again to the dialogue. So then when we got into, that was like 320 by 280 resolution, that show. We literally tried to make it look like you could see every pixel as a brick in a wall. It was just like, wow. I think with home movies, we went up to 640 by 480, which seemed like such a high resolution back then.
Yeah.
And then we used a smear effect. There was a smear tool in the program where we would take a drawing and just basically smear it. And it became much of a dirtier kind of a squiggle. And I don't know, I think once we switched over to Flash, the boil line effect was going to be a lot harder. We've realized we don't need to do that anymore.
Yeah.
But in terms of production, it was great. It just solved so many problems when you could just create that sort of line boil effect and call it a day. And we would do several versions of the same drawing where they would all squiggle, but since they were 5 framed loops, you would have one where the character wasn't doing anything, and then another file of the same exact 5 frames, but the mouth was going in a loop to make it look like they're talking, and then one where the eyes are closed and one where the eye pupils are looking one direction or another direction, like all these different variations, sometimes 10 to 12. And then all of those would get exported or digitized into the Avid as little clips of video. And then the video editor would then choose which version to make them talk, stop talking, look one way, blink, that kind of thing. So a lot of the animation was actually done in video editing. Mm. But in terms of the actual squiggle vision, it became one of those techniques that it's going to get old. It's going to get kind of stale, I think, after a while. And I think with home movies, we needed to abandon it so that we could, it would probably, I think what it did is it freed us up to do other actual animations that weren't just relying too much on just that boiled line squiggle vision effect. So it got us to a great place we otherwise may not have found in terms of doing TV animation and shows like home movies. But we got to that point with Flash when we started incorporating that as our mainstay animation software that, you know, hey, we don't need to do the line boil effect anymore. We can actually animate now, you know. So it served its purpose, and then we were done with it.
Yeah. So the workflow, basically, once you guys went from squiggle vision to Flash animation, that kind of freed you up more to, you know, animate the characters a little bit more, the backgrounds and stuff like that.
Yeah, because you weren't always tied to this 5-frame loop, which could, you know, kind of hinder your ability to animate certain things, especially if you needed to, do a walk cycle or just more action-oriented stuff. But so yeah, I think with Flash, it just changed everything just because of the nature of the application itself. We started realizing, oh, there's more sophisticated tools. We can, you know, there's just different ways to animate that, I don't know, was just easier. You know, interpolating motion over time using keyframes and tweening and things like that. But also, you know, you can still do frame by frame as well. But it was a different animal altogether in terms of how we created the animation, right? So it kind of forced our hand to say, hey, let's abandon it. Now's the time. There's been it's brand new to Cartoon Network, new software, maybe a cleaner look, and then we'll not hear people complain about how the line squiggling is making them feel ill or dizzy or something. So we get it. Yeah.
We just finished season 1 as far as like the rewatch of the podcast, and now we're just starting season 2. And already in season 2, like for example, a establishing shot of the school, instead of just the school and a flag waving. Now we're zooming into the school. We're going down the hall. We have a student walk by. We take a turn. We go into, you know, it's much more dynamic.
Yeah, we started like you're literally watching us as animators mature in a way. Like we started realizing, oh yeah, we can do camera moves and stuff like that. Speaking of the school, I got to say something. So, you know, having never really animated before, but cutting my teeth doing these TV shows, I am responsible for the school establishing shot when we were doing it for UPN in Animator Pro, and specifically the flag waving. I've been called out on that by other animator friends of mine because it is by far the worst animation ever. And that's all me. And I take almost some sort of weird pride in it because I'm like, I'm going to try to make this flag wave. And I was trying, and I'm like, yeah, all right, ship it. We got to get this thing done. And like, I don't know, maybe a couple of years ago, a friend of mine said, who is responsible for this? And I'm like, that's me. I know it's horrible. And it was an establishing shot that's used like every episode. And every time I see it, I cringe. I'm like, oh my God, don't look at the flag. I would so not do that. I didn't even have to make it animate. It could just have been static. But
yeah. Well, first of all, I definitely remember the flag specifically pointing that out in one of the early podcast episodes and saying this speaks to what I feel is the charm of the animation style when it first came out.
Yeah.
So I didn't look at it. I mean, obviously I don't have like an animator's eye. So I didn't look at it as like, oh my God. I looked at it as like, yeah, that's the charm. Thank God for that. But I mean, it almost looks like Brendan himself maybe animated it or something. But I'm glad it's charming. But it's so much like even like the canteen in that 5th episode, with pee in my canteen, like having that just bounce. That's just us trying out how to animate things, like literally just like, can I make this work? Is this going to look good? And we're just trying it. So there's even the after it was on, we switched to Flash and it was on Cartoon Network. There's a scene or an episode where McGurk is in a contest to stay up the longest to win a DVD player. And there's a scene where he's on the couch and he's trying to stay awake and he can't. And you can hear him like his last gasp, before he falls asleep. And I wanted to
animate a hand coming up into the camera view as if someone's drowning, that kind of thing. And I remember sitting there I'm picturing, I want this to be a hand that like literally is sort of grasping and then closing and then dipping down out of view. And I'm just going to try it. And I literally used my own hand as a reference, just put it up in the air, and I'm drawing it frame by frame and closing it and drawing another frame and adding it. And it worked. It worked well enough. It's not perfect, but again, it's almost better if it's not perfect, because then it's distracting if you're looking at a very realistic hand and studying its motion and stuff like that. So I think the beauty was in its imperfections overall.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So I know some artists tend to not consume the product that they help create. I personally, I understand that. As a comedian, I try not to watch my own comedy. That being said, did you watch home movies?
That's interesting. I did, but not all of it. Like, I've never sat down and watched every episode. I have the whole DVD collection. I hardly ever pop it in and watch it. I have sat down and watched an episode or two just to relive it a little bit. But now I also appreciate, having stepped away from it for so long, I can appreciate more of that first experience. And so it's an interesting thing to watch, and also kind of, I don't know, to just sort of go down memory lane a little bit, and it just brings back memories. But yeah, I'm like you. Sometimes like the last thing you want is to watch or listen to yourself or look at the work that you did. But it never got old, though, when we, working on these shows. We did a show called Science Court that was on Saturday mornings for a couple of seasons on ABC. And we worked on it, and it's just weird to wake up and then turn on the TV and see it. And It's like, all those files are on my hard drive. That's weird, It's just crazy. So it doesn't get old. And if I see something like someone posts a clip on it on social media of one of the shows or something, it's always fun to watch. It really is, because I'm not that close to it anymore. It's been 20, 25 years. So now it's sort of a different thing to look back on it. But at the time, I don't remember really tuning in to watch the next episode.
Right. Once you were done working on it, you're like, yeah, we're done here. I'm not. That's enough.
It's too, because especially if you're video editing it and you're looking at every scene over and over and over again, as you're playing it back and getting a feel for the pacing. You're just so close to it. You just want to step away from it, not look at it for a while.
But I'm sure it'd be fun to revisit it now, with all your additional years of experience, and again, finding the charm in it and looking back.
Totally.
And like, oh God, I would have done it so differently if I was, to do that scene now.
Right. But also you don't want to, yes and no, I probably would approach it differently, but I'm kind of glad that it was approached the way it was when we did it as well. Again, getting back to the whole charm of it and the imperfections of it, So there's something to be said for that. Absolutely.
Oh yeah. All right. I have two more questions for you, Chris. The first one's pretty simple. Do you have a favorite character on the show?
I think Jason, because I'm Greek with my last name Georgenes, but his was Papadopoulos.
Yes.
And so I don't know. And that wasn't I don't know who came. I'm sure it was John Benjamin who came up with the idea to give, or maybe it was Lauren. I have no idea, but I don't know, for some reason, I just love the concept of giving him that name, Jason Papadopoulos. That's just funny. I don't know why. It's just random, unexpected, and almost meaningless, but it's there. Plus, I always loved, you just never knew what he was going to say next. And as such a young kid, he still had John Benjamin portraying him with all of the worldly experience of John Benjamin. So injecting those lines that you were quoting earlier and just that sort of worldly charm of this precocious little, disgusting little child. It's just, I don't know, there's something about that always, he was so much more complex,
Yes.
and he was way ahead of everybody, almost light years in terms of filmmaking and things and acting, and but yet he's blowing snots out of his nose and whatever. So it's just,
I think that's the great thing about the character of Jason. He is the wild card. You don't know if he is about to drop some of the most profound knowledge on you or tell a story about getting something stuck in something.
Yeah, yeah,
You
right.
know,
Yeah, what was it? Something he was putting in his nose. Was it M&Ms or something?
he
Marbles? I
he he
forget.
put marbles in his nose in
Yep,
the
that's what it is.
mortgages
Yep.
and marbles, and then there's the Franz Kafka episode where they do the Franz Kafka rock opera.
Yes. Yep.
He's talking about how he can't hear the music because his ears are bleeding, and Melissa's like, "Well, you're standing too close." He's like, "Well, I got a toothpick stuck in my ear and I can't get it out." And even at one point, Melissa's like, "Yeah, I really like the music." Like, just completely like, "Okay, dude, changing the subject. That's gross."
Yeah. Right. Oh, yeah. That's the charm of him. He's just such a complicated yet simple character, and I don't know. It was just so I almost want to just bring him back to life somehow through animation, and just had to ask John Benjamin to record more, or ask Lauren to like dig up some audio from back then that was never used, and we could just have this whole other series of animated shorts and just involving Jason or something. I think that would be hilarious.
We've talked about with the amount of retro scripting and improv that there's probably some just absolute gems on the cutting room floor.
Oh yeah, especially when they were doing Walter and Perry.
Oh my gosh,
that was Brendan Small and John Benjamin with their voices pitched up even further, right, as you know, and just the stuff that they would just take it too far. I'm sure it's pretty much wherever those scenes ended was Lauren just cutting them off right before things get like too R or X rated.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, that's so funny.
Real
quick side question. So did you design a lot of the characters, or was this a group effort, or?
Yes and no. McGurk, I think, was me.
Wow.
I think mostly it was Kim O'Neill and myself. Brendan, I think she did most of Brendan. It's hard to remember because it was kind of a combination of us designing them. The house that Brendan lived in was modeled after the house I lived in here in Wellesley, Massachusetts at the time. Yeah, because we had to, figure out what his house looked like, and I'm like, well, why don't I just model it after the one I know best, which was the one I was living in. So it's just really funny to see, like even Josie, the baby that was in that bouncy chair and that sort of arched doorway. That's where we had my first son in a bouncy chair in the arched doorway that led into the kitchen. So I just drew from life in that sense. And even the upstairs bedrooms, that was all the same thing. It wasn't the same color. Like the kitchen was like, I don't know, like olive green and purple or something crazy. But I changed, I made those colors the way they were just to make it look more cartoony and unique. But yeah, stuff like that we would draw from life. But the characters themselves, it was, I think, mostly Kim O'Neill and myself early on, because it was a very small team that was designing the initial pilot, and those characters remained pretty much unchanged from the initial pilot. Even Paula Poundstone's character, the mom, I think that was me. But yeah, it's hard to say. But it was, I'm going to give credit where credit's due between Kim O'Neill. And Andre Lyman may have had some input too, but he didn't draw as much. But I vividly remember sitting next to Kim. We were on the same computer and just, finalizing the characters, and she started filling in their bodysuits, which became, the common theme throughout. And I just thought, like, that's not going to fly. And like, how naive was I? But that's what I loved about her. She wasn't, she never went to an art school, never really took art lessons. So she had no rules, or she wasn't taught to do anything a certain way. So she always approached everything with this very unique perspective and just said, yeah, no, I kind of like this. We're going to go with this. Even Brendan, like the hair going in one direction and the nose going in the other. It's kind of like, that's not how I would have drawn. I would have never thought of that in a million years. And, we did other shows, and she would design even just backdrops or props in a way that just would never, if you were to build it in the real world, it would just all fall over, but in the cartoon world, so if part of the charm too is just us being, in a way, sort of unskilled and given all this freedom to do whatever we wanted. And it just worked. Somehow you could tell the animators were having fun making it.
Yeah. The amount of stuff that happens in the background is just, you can tell the animators are having a lot of fun with the garden gnomes. And then there's a scene where Brendan and Paula are at I think it's Alien Burger, and there's so many, they're spot 51. You see a car get abducted by an alien in the background. I mean, all kinds of stuff going on. And
all kinds of Easter eggs. Exactly. And it was literally because no one was there was no tyrannical art director force, overseeing anything in that sense. And we were all just we're on equal playing field in terms of being peers and just saying, hey, we feel lucky that we're even here and getting to do this. So.
Oh, that's awesome. All right,
Yeah,
Chris,
great.
I have one final question for you. This one's a little bit longer. So obviously, again, like I do deep dives into these episodes. Some early season 1 commentary, Brendan Small makes a comment about people having the ability to create animation on much higher quality than home movies with just like very basic tools that were available at the time. Now, this was probably like 20 years ago when he said it. So as the years of technology have, gone on, the statement I feel is just more and more true every day. So in your opinion, what is a good starting point for anyone who's interested in either animating or illustrating or editing, given today's technology? Like if somebody is interested in, animation or illustration, what would you recommend to them as like a good starting point to pursue this avenue of art?
Oh, it's a great question. There's so many apps designed for animating, whether you have an iPad, there's several iPad apps that allow you to, dabble in it, whether it's drawing frame by frame, whatever it is, but start simple, do the whole bouncing ball thing, or there's so many great tools. As I mentioned earlier, Adobe Flash was huge. It became Adobe Animate for a while. I've now since moved on to something called Moho, which is a super fun application because it's, vector based, but it has all these cool rigging tools and bone structures you can do. But sometimes it's just open it up, draw a frame, and then create another frame next to it. And you can just start creating. It's actually pretty simple to create any kind of animation. You could even start as simple as we did back in the day, where you take a drawing that maybe you've already done, import it into an application and redraw it, and just redraw it 4 or 5 times and then play it back. And then you'll see that character come to life, and then maybe add a blink and just baby steps here and there. These are all just tools as far as I'm concerned. It's not unlike giving 100 carpenters a hammer. They're all going to build something. Like if you tell them to build a box, they're all going to build a slightly different looking box. But these are just tools, and it's really your kind of personality that comes out through them. But yeah, sometimes it's great to even take a course. There's so much on YouTube, as we know.
Oh, yeah.
And there's so many great books. But I've taught animation. I used to do a week-long animation class at the University of Hartford every summer to teach people who are fine artists who have never animated before. And they would take their work, they would pitch their ideas on day 1, and by Wednesday they start to get it, and then by Friday they all have like a minute-long animated short or sequence of something, whether it's just a looping thing. And they're so excited. Like you feel the excitement throughout the week. And then Friday's just like this magical day where all these computers are up in the room and they're all playing animations that they've all created. So for me, it's not being intimidated by the word animation, because it's very easy to get scared by that term. Sometimes, everyone has its own unique style. Everyone hears the word animation and you think like whatever, Pixar or Disney, and it has to be perfectly smooth and anatomically correct. No, it doesn't. You can just wing it, just dive in, make mistakes. I've made that, going back to the high school or the middle school establishing shot of the American flag. Like make those errors. There's so much, bad animation I've created, but I've learned from every little mistake. And you just have to sit down and roll up your sleeves and just try it. And you'll be amazed at how you can get pretty quick and decent results with not as much effort as you think. But it all depends on the application, how easy and approachable it is. Or even just take a stack of like those Post-it notes and just draw in the corner, make a little flip book, like actual analog flip book. Like those are fun to do. I've done that with my kids, and they get it. Like they see the frame by frame aspect, and it's easy. I've done stuff for like live where I've just create a blank keyframe and draw a stroke, turn on onion skin, create another keyframe, draw another stroke, and kind of make it trail along like a bee flying around or something. And you spend 10 minutes doing 100 or 150 keyframes like that really quickly, and then you play it back and you've got this really cool looking animation that always blows people away. And I'm like, I'm not doing anything that none of us don't already know how to do.
Yeah.
I'm just using these simple tools to my advantage to get something, done in a quick, fun little way. But yeah, I guess if that makes any sense. For me, it's just, I'm never intimidated by failure or by the tool itself. It's just, I want to sit down and see what happens. Try it. Don't be afraid to make mistakes.
Absolutely. And I will speak to that I'm sure it is an intimidation thing for some people. Like they're, oh, I could never do that. But even though the term bad animation, I think is very subjective, because I grew up on Adult Swim. There were plenty of shows like 12 Ounce Mouse and Tom Goes to the Mayor and all kinds of shows where I wouldn't argue the animation is necessarily like good, but it's the show is good. It's you can make it your own thing. You can definitely do something in your own style and make it happen. So
yeah, I agree. I totally agree. I've seen great animations done where someone is just, with their computer, record into Audacity or something that, a free audio program and just, I don't know, create a minute long, whatever, and then animate to it. It doesn't have to, it could be black and white line drawings, whatever. It's really just the story. And as long as that comes across, but it can be fun. That's the one thing I learned. If you told me 30 years ago, you're going to be a professional animator for most of your career, I'd be like, what are you talking about? There's no way. I don't have a chance.
Right.
But yeah, thanks to these tools, it's very possible. So, for me, again, like I said, it's just a tool, whether it's Flash or Moho or Toon Boom Harmony, whatever. They all basically allow you to do the same thing: draw over a series of frames or interpolate a drawing across the stage over a series of frames, and you just figure out your own path, your own way. There's no one way of doing anything. So everyone has their own way and technique and style, and it's just, don't be intimidated by it.
I think that's amazing advice. Thank you so much, Chris. And I think that's actually a really good place to go ahead and end it. So the last thing I want to say, obviously, besides thank you very, very much for doing this. I really appreciate it.
You're welcome. My pleasure. This was really fun.
Oh, thank you. Any plugs? I mean, I know you're a drummer, you're an animator. Is there anything you want to put out there for people to check out?
Nothing specific. I am proud of something. This cool little animation, a short that I did that I never thought would go anywhere. That might be just fun for them to check out. It's not so much a plug, but a fun little story. Really quick. My daughter, when she was 6, this was back in 2009. I've recorded her a lot, and I've animated her a lot. But I did record her telling a joke back in 2009, and then it sat on a hard drive for 13 years. I forgot about it, and I found it a couple years ago, 2022, I think it was, when looking for another. I plugged this old hard drive in, and it actually worked. I could see all the files. I found like 100 folders of old projects, and I opened up a folder I didn't recognize, and it was all those recordings of her telling this joke. And I realized, oh my goodness, I can't believe I never animated this. So anyway, I promised myself I would. I copied it over to my computer, the whole folder, and I started storyboarding, designing characters. Long story short, I finally finished it with the help of a brilliant background artist and a friend of mine who's a composer. And it was just this 2-minute long short. And I posted it on YouTube, added to my portfolio. But my friend who did the score said, you got to submit it to film festivals. I'm like, this is not film festival worthy. This isn't anything. He's like, no. And he kept on forcing me to do it. I finally did, and it's been winning awards. So it's kind of fun. It's kind of crazy. So it can be seen on my website, which is keyframer.com. But otherwise, there's nothing specific to plug other than that. I guess at this point, I'm just, freelancing and have fun little animation projects for clients now, and gigging a lot with bands and stuff. So that's my whole world, man. I love it. It's great. I feel lucky I get to still do all of this.
That's so awesome. What's the name of this short animation?
It's called Book.
Book.
Yeah, and it'll make sense when you watch it. It's like a 2-minute long short involving a little chicken, a librarian, and a frog. And it's just my daughter telling a joke when she was 6 years old. She's got like the cutest voice, or she did back then before puberty hit. Now she's 21 and in college. But what the cool part about that story was that I knew if I had forgotten about it, then she has no recollection of
Right.
recording it. And so when I had it mostly done, I showed it to her, and she was just like, "Wait, what? Is that me?" Like she had no recollection of it. So it was just kind of funny to see her reaction to something she did so long ago.
That's so awesome. Yeah, I would highly encourage everyone to check that out. Chris, again, thank you so much for doing this. When I reached out to you, I'm like, there's no way I'm gonna get this. First of all, very busy gentleman to talk about home movies with me, but you were so game and so just enthusiastic. It made me very excited to talk to you. So again, thank you so much for doing this, Chris.
My pleasure. Yeah, it's part of just me appreciating how much everyone loves the show and how much that whole part, that chapter of my life kind of springboarded a career I otherwise wouldn't have. So I'm always thankful.
That's awesome. So as I continue to do this podcast, I might reach out to you with a question here and there. Just for some insight. I know actually, oh my gosh, there was one quick question. Do they ever establish what state this show takes place in?
Oh, I don't think so.
No, there's comments in the commentary that allude to it taking place in Florida, but there's
No. Yes or no. There was never any geographical conversation. It just didn't exist.
Nice.
I mean, you could probably by default say it was here in Massachusetts because that's where the show was created. But otherwise, no one ever said this is where the Smalls live. No,
Right.
It was just. I mean, it kind of, the street they're on is kind of modeled after the town I lived in, and of course, his house is modeled after the one I lived in. But that could be any town. Honestly,
Sure.
It could be Virginia, it could be wherever. So,
Yeah.
it's typical suburbia. Which is kind of better because it kind of, I don't know, I guess more people could relate no matter where they are to something like that. But
exactly.
Yeah, no, there's I love how questions like that just sort of organically pop up because we literally did not have reasons or answers for a lot of what we did.
Right. We did it because.
Yeah, because we had to. We had a deadline. Let's ship it,
Awesome. Oh, well, thanks again, Chris. I really do appreciate it. And again, I encourage everyone to go check out Chris and, all of his projects that he's working on.
Thank you, dude. This was so much fun. It was great to meet you and talk to you. And again, don't hesitate to ask any other questions.
I will. Thank you so much, Chris. You take care now.
All right. Bye.
Bye. That's going to do it for this episode of Rewatching Home Movies. Thanks again to Chris Georgenes for taking the time to speak with me. If you liked what you heard, you can check out our Linktree at RHMpod. There you can like, follow, and subscribe, or leave us a 5-star review. I will read 5-star reviews on the podcast. Thanks to Tom Traeger for the refresh of our logo, and Chris Bongat for the use of our theme song. We'll be back next week with a very special Season 1 recap episode. On behalf of myself, Tim, and my co-host, Marcin, and Adele, thank you for rewatching home movies with us. We'll see you next week. Bye. Now enjoy 5 minutes of me having a mental breakdown over technical difficulties. Okay. Let's go. Check 1 2, check 1 2. What the fuck? Come on, dude. Holy shit. Oh my goodness. Fuck me. What the fuck? God damn it. Okay. 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 Try this again. Oh my goodness. Ugh. Holy shit, dude. Check 1 2, check 1 2. Fucking hate this, dude. I hate this so much. Skip. It's fine. Come on, please load, dude. Please just work. Please just work. I just need you to work. Please. God damn it, dude. Oh my God. Check. Check 1 2, check 1 2. Please work, please. Please just work, please. I just need you to work, please. Oh my goodness. Holy cow.
Hello?
Hey, Chris.
Oh, there we go.
Oh my God, dude. I am having a mental breakdown with just my Murphy's Law of electronics today.
Dude, I totally get it because I can't even tell you how many times, like, my computer works flawlessly every day, every minute of every day. And then I got to do like 15 minutes of live presentation. And then it's like everything goes to shit. Like,
Dude,
in those 15 minutes.
Seriously, man. And like, it was something as simple as I moved a computer from one room to another room. That's
What were
it.
you thinking?
That's it, dude. And oh my gosh. Okay. So, and of course, Audacity is not picking anything up, but my mixer is. So I think I'm flying without a safety net here. We're just recording directly to the mixer. I'm on a wing and a prayer here, Chris. Oh my goodness.
I get it. I get it. I know the feeling.
Okay, let me get my life in order here.
Yeah, take your time.
Before we get started, Georgenes?
Yeah, nailed it.
Awesome.
Gotcha.
Yeah, so I just want to make sure, I'm getting it right just out of respect.
What do you do on stage?
I do stand up mainly, yeah.
Oh, cool.
Yeah,
Cool.
I run a weekly comedy open mic and then a monthly comedy showcase. And
Where are you located?
I am just south of Chicago.
Nice. Awesome.
Yeah, how about you?
I'm East Coast. Yeah.
Okay, well, Chris, before we jump into this, I'm just going to let you know, dude, this isn't any like hard hitting. I don't have any like gotcha moment questions here. It's pretty chill, pretty, I'm obviously obsessed with the show home movies. I made the connection that you had worked on it. So I just wanted to, kind of talk your ear off a little bit about home movies. So
Cool.
if there's anything at any point you're like, yeah, dude, I'm not going to answer that, or you need me everything's going to be edited before it goes out,
Okay.
So you got a couple days to change your mind on anything.
Cool. Yep.
But yeah, other than that, I think I got maybe 10 to 12 questions here.
Awesome. Yeah, man.
So,
I'm happy to answer anything and everything I can.
awesome.
Yeah.
All right. Geez. Okay. I'm just still settling down a little bit from this technological nightmare.
Dude, I got to say, I love how many fans that the show still has. It's incredible to me. Like to see all these groups and stuff online about like seeing people getting tattoos of some of the characters and stuff. It blows my mind every time. Yeah,
yeah, and
it's incredible. Like that's stuff like we drew, for like basically for fun back then, and I'm like, to see someone get it inked on their calf muscle or something.
Right.
It's like, what? Yeah.
It's almost reminiscent of McGurk going over all his tattoos, and you're like, yeah, that's permanent, man. What do you?
So I think someone actually did get that same tattoo he did, like that cheese tattoo or the cow's head tattoo. I forget I can't even remember what it was, but
yeah, it was. He says it's the cow head from that cheese I like.
Yes.
So I was like, oh, maybe they can't say. And then like 2 seconds later, he's like, oh, and the Chiquita banana. So I'm like, oh, well, maybe we can say.
Yeah, there's stuff we got by the networks and some stuff we couldn't, but whatever. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's
awesome.
So long ago too, but yeah.
Oh, dude. Yeah. I mean, you're talking at this point, what, 25, 26 years ago?
Yeah, basically. Yep.
Wild.
It was late. Wait, was it late? No, it was like early 2000s. Yeah. Like you're exactly right around there. 2000-ish. Yeah, 1999.
Wild. Okay, well, I think we're pretty much good to go. So if you don't mind, I think I'm going to get this interview started.
Cool. Yeah, man.
Okay, I'm going to do a little countdown for myself for editing purposes.
Yep.
Let's see here. 3, 2, 1.